The Creator is out in theaters, new sci-fi epic from writer-director Gareth Edwards, who previously made the 2014 version of Godzilla, as well as Star Wars Rogue One. This new film stars John David Washington, Gemma Chan, Allison Janney, and Ken Watanabe. The story takes place in a sort of alternate universe, near future. In this world, AI in the form of sentient robots has been present in human society for decades, helping out and living peacefully with humanity. But at one point, a nuclear warhead was detonated in Los Angeles, and the AI was to blame. So it was completely outlawed in the Western world and basically eradicated, but it still exists in Asia, where a mysterious AI creator named Nirmata is operating in secret. John David Washington plays Joshua Taylor, a former US operative who is roped in to go on sort of one last mission. He's supposed to find Nirmata and the new super weapon that he supposedly created and destroy that weapon. And this, in the process, will perhaps give him a chance to find his wife, who until recently was presumed dead. But then the mission gets complicated because it turns out that the weapon is actually a child robot. Story goes from there, and despite technically being an original new sci-fi property, which is always quite exciting, it's actually a very clear mix of three very, very familiar story tropes. The first one is the wolf and the cub. Older grizzled warrior has to take care of a child on a journey. I mean, even just in recent media, we've had numerous examples of that. Logan, The Mandalorian, The Last of Us, The Witcher books. The second component is the tired-old question of whether AI deserves to be seen as human. Again, clear roots in things like Blade Runner, Ghost in the Shell, the Robots series from Isaac Asimov. And finally, component 3 is the anti-war, anti-American imperialism sort of sentiment, which can be traced all the way back to the Vietnam War stories. And even Gareth Edwards cited Apocalypse Now as one of the influences, but also it can be read as a criticism of the more recent American involvement in the Middle East. Put all three of those components together and add in some elements borrowed from other sci-fi things like Akira, Cyberpunk 2077, Elysium, and you got yourself The Creator. And how good is the end result? I would say it's okay, but not nearly as good as I hoped it would be and as I think it could have been. I'll start with the things I enjoyed though. The cinematography is spectacular. Edwards is really good at evoking a sense of grand spectacle, a grand scale. And here he's working with Greg Fraser, who has experience with that exact thing from Dune. This film is very pretty to look at, and not just even the grand shots of landscape and the big ships and the big tanks, etc., but even the action and the more intimate moments, the sort of on the ground, in the face of the characters scenes. Apparently, the film has been shot with smaller cameras on location with no green screens. A lot of the camera shots are on the move. And in general, it's trying to evoke a sense of the older movies with the way that it looks. And I think it succeeds at that. The film looks properly grainy, raw, and has a definite texture to it. I like the music made by Hans Zimmer, but also including some popular songs. Like there's a moment that uses a Radiohead song for a sequence, which I found to be somewhat surprising, but also very fitting, and it was a kind of a haunting choice. I loved Madeleine Yuna Voiles, who plays the child robot. She's excellent in the role, really spectacular performance for such a young child actor. I also really like the production design. The Nomad, which is the giant sort of flying space station slash gunship, is terrific with its sort of weird blue targeting lasers and just the sense of dread that it evokes from the very first scenes of the film. Also, the design of the robots is really interesting. Even if it is sort of impractical, you have to admit they look pretty cool. And then I also think that the film tries to do something interesting with its anti-imperialist storyline, even if it is a bit heavy-handed and not subtle at all. There is a moment where one of the robots from the Asian village which is under attack says, do you know what happens to America if they lose this war? Nothing, because we just want to live here in peace, which resonated with me on some level. However, having said all of that, the film has its share of flaws and problems. John David Washington is once again a charisma vacuum. I thought he was serviceable in Tenet when he first broke out, but then Amsterdam showed me that he really stands out in a bad way amongst other better actors, and now the creator shows him struggling to be a leading man. I think he is incredibly one note and pretty wooden. Secondly, as I said before, the film is not very subtle, and I also think it has trouble with properly developing its characters. Like at the beginning of the film, Taylor is this specific person. Okay, good. And then at the end, he is now a changed man, this person. Okay, that's cool as well. But I'm not convinced that I really saw him get from point A to point B, that this emotional journey really happened. Now, part of it may be the acting, as I mentioned, but part of it may also be that reportedly a ton of stuff was cut from the film. Some people involved in the production say that it was as much as 2 hours of material, and it's visible, especially in the final act. The movie starts to move at breakneck speeds, breaking the rules of logic, geography, physics, and basic plot mechanics. Characters seemingly travel across the world in what looks like minutes. Things happen really quickly without any time to breathe and any time for the characters to just stop and let us think about things and let us take some time with them. And while we're on the subject of mechanics, man, does this film not hold up when you think about it a bit longer. Like, I mean, the world building. Like, let's start with the Nomad ship. It looks cool as fuck, but it seems to be moving really slowly whenever we see it, and yet it's always there wherever the characters happen to be in Asia. Whenever they look up, the Nomad is up in the sky. I mean, Asia is a big continent, and so why is it always right above our heads? And also the scale of it is all over the place, because the filmmakers seemingly can't decide whether the ship is supposed to be in orbit or just low above the ground. In some shots it appears to be this sort of giant in the sky, and for that, for it to be this giant and for it to be still in orbit around Earth, which is where it's supposed to be according to the explanation given, it would need to actually be the size of a continent, which then again the movie proves that it isn't. So it's like, it kind of, is it high up above the Earth? Is it low? Is it big? Is it small? It's sort of all over the place, and it even varies from shot to shot. Secondly, the geopolitics of this film make no sense at all. The US is essentially committing genocide in broad daylight in the countries of Asia, and the local military is just nowhere to be seen. The only resistance seems to be the local police and the robot insurgents, and it's never sort of explained how that all is supposed to work. Is there a state there? Is there not? Is there an army? Is the US officially at war with them? We don't really know. And I get that it's meant to be a metaphor for Vietnam or the Middle East, but come on, it just doesn't make any sense. So I think things like these, obvious glaring faults with the story mechanics, with the set pieces, with the characterization, prevent the film from being as good as it could have been if you consider that you had so many great building blocks. I mean, it could have been better in the hands of better filmmakers, perhaps. I think there's an interesting story to tell here. There are interesting themes to explore, and the film already looks and sounds amazing, but it's just not quite good enough. It's just fine, which in this particular case is a bit of a disappointment.